The first time I heard my husband call my deafness a golden window, I was standing in a law firm lobby pretending my legs weren't shaking. The marble floor was so shiny I could see my own face in it, pale, hollow-eyed, the good little wife who was supposed to be helpless. Fluorescent lights hummed above me, phones rang in distant offices, and right behind the glass doors, Ethan was striding across the parking lot with his mother Vivian, looking like they were about to do something perfectly reasonable. They thought I still couldn't hear. They thought the woman they'd labeled incompetent was waiting quietly at home, surrounded by silence. But what they didn't know was that the deaf wife they were about to betray had heard every single word. Before I go on, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. Because what happened next to me, no one saw it coming, not even the people who thought they had every part of my life under their control. I didn't always live in silence. In fact, some of my earliest memories are filled with sound, soft, warm, familiar, in a way that makes my chest ache now. The bell on the door of my parents' bookstore had this gentle jingle, like wind chimes caught in a summer breeze. Every time someone walked in, that sound meant life was happening. Conversation, curiosity, books changing hands. I grew up behind that counter, stacking paperbacks, inhaling the scent of old pages and cinnamon tea my mom always kept on the warmer. Back then, everything felt steady, predictable, safe. I didn't know it then, but the way they raised me, their gentleness, their fairness, would one day become the standard I used to measure every relationship in my adult life, especially my marriage. And Ethan would fail it in ways I could never have imagined. I remember the night my parents died with a clarity that feels unfair. Some memories should fade for mercy, but not this one. The phone rang at 1:17 a.m. I remember because the digital clock glowed in the dark like an accusation. I heard my dad's ringtone echo faintly from the kitchen where he'd left his phone charging. I thought it was weird, but not terrifying. Not yet. The terror came later in the sterile hospital hallway, where a doctor with tired eyes told me their car had been hit by a delivery truck that ran a red light. The world didn't go quiet then. Not literally, but the sounds changed. Everything grew sharper, almost painful. The squeak of nurses' shoes, the hiss of oxygen valves, the distant wail of someone else's grief. Before the funeral, a lawyer sat me down in his office, a place that smelled like leather dust and old coffee. He slid a folder toward me. "Your parents left a trust," he said gently. "They wanted you to have this, but only when you truly needed it. $220,000. Blood money. Love money. The last gift of two people who'd spent their whole lives living modestly, saving quietly, believing their daughter's safety mattered more than their comfort. I didn't touch a cent of it. I couldn't. Not while the bookstore still smelled like them. When I met Ethan 2 years later, it felt like the universe was finally letting me breathe again. He walked into a charity event my school hosted wearing a gray blazer and a smile that could have convinced anyone he was harmless. He had that clean, crisp confidence of someone who'd never once worried about belonging. We talked by the refreshment table for almost an hour, me with my hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm cider, him leaning in like every word I said mattered. Ethan made me feel seen. That's what I remember most. After losing my parents, I had been drifting even while pretending not to be. He anchored me. Or maybe, as I'd later realize, he simply learned how to read my vulnerabilities and shape himself around them. Our wedding was small, elegant, and, if I'm being honest, tinged with something sour. I didn't have the courage to acknowledge. Vivian, his mother, wore navy satin and a frozen smile. She hugged me stiffly, her perfume sharp and floral, and whispered, "You clean up nicely," as though my entire existence before that day had been an embarrassing warm-up. During the toasts, she leaned over to Ethan, thinking I couldn't hear her over the clinking glasses. "She's sweet," she murmured, simple. "She'll trust you with everything." I laughed it off at the time. I thought it was just a poor attempt at a compliment. I didn't know it then, but that sentence would circle back years later, landing with the weight of a prophecy fulfilled. For the first few years, our marriage was normal, or what I believed normal looked like. I taught my classes, graded assignments late into the night, fielded calls from parents convinced their child was a misunderstood genius. Ethan built his career in real estate development, working on projects he spoke about like they were planets he personally planned to reshape. He'd come home tired but energized, talking about investment opportunities, permits profit margins. I didn't understand half of it, but I listened. I wanted to be supportive the way my parents had been with each other. He often said, "You don't have to worry about money, Clara. I've got us." And because I loved him, and because I wanted to believe I was safe again, I let him handle the finances. He kept everything organized in tidy folders, and I trusted the way he touched those papers the same way I trusted the way he touched me, with confidence, purpose, and a softness that later proved to be practiced, not natural. I didn't see the first cracks. I didn't want to. Then came the winter flu season at school. Coughs echoing down hallways, a dozen tissues crumpled in tiny hands, teachers dropping like dominoes. I caught an ear infection that lingered longer than any I'd had before. I took antibiotics, rested, when I could pressed warm compresses to my ear. But I also brushed off the deeper ache, the muffled ringing, the occasional dizziness. "It'll pass," I told Ethan. He nodded, kissed my forehead, but I could see in his eyes that something was shifting. Not concern, calculation. I didn't know it then, but he'd already begun asking questions. Quiet questions. Questions about medical incapacity and guardianship laws in our state. By the time February came around, the infection had burrowed deep. I woke up one morning in a cocoon of silence so thick I thought I was still dreaming. I tapped the alarm clock. Its red digits blinked, but it made no sound. My breath made no sound. Even Ethan's startled voice, "Clara, are you okay?" was just movement-shaped nothingness. The world didn't just go quiet, it disappeared. And Ethan stepped forward with open arms, ready to help. Or at least that's what I believed. I didn't know it mattered later that helping me was never his goal. It was controlling me. The first days of deafness were a kind of terror I never knew existed. People think silence is peaceful. It isn't, not when it swallows the world whole. Not when you open your mouth and hear nothing, not even your own voice. Not when you look at someone you love and realize communication has become a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Ethan reacted fast. Too fast, maybe. He grabbed his phone, typed messages to me, guided me around the house like I was made of glass. He took control of scheduling the doctor appointments, the insurance calls, the follow-ups. At first I was grateful. It felt like he was stepping up. Like he was becoming the husband I always hoped he'd be. Then Vivian moved in. She arrived with casseroles, floral scarves, and a tone that made my skin tighten. "You poor thing," she wrote on a notepad, large, neat letters like she was addressing a child. "You must be overwhelmed." She never wrote anything about strength, only weakness, fear, dependence, words she could use later. In those 5 weeks, the house changed. It wasn't mine anymore. The doorbell rang, and I never knew who it was. Ethan answered every time. Mail disappeared into his hands. Packages were taken upstairs. I would touch my phone and realize entire conversations with my principal had happened without me. "I'll handle it," Ethan would type. "Just rest." When I asked if any letters came from the bank, he smiled sympathetically, squeezed my shoulder, and wrote, "Nothing important." Back then I believed him. The strangest thing was how the environment became louder. In other ways, vibrations shifts tension. I began sensing when their conversations stopped abruptly as I entered a room. The way Vivian's expression softened too quickly, like she had to put on her caretaker mask. The way Ethan angled his phone away whenever I walked by. One night I found them in the kitchen speaking softly. Their bodies turned inward, like conspirators. Vivian was holding a folder, thick yellow worn. As soon as they noticed me, Ethan snapped to attention, took the folder, tucked it under his arm, and guided me gently back to the living room. He set me on the couch like I might break. Just talking about taxes, he wrote, his handwriting tight. I didn't know it then, but that same folder would become the center of everything. Jenna visited often during those weeks. She'd walk in with soups and grocery bags, take one look at me, and something in her face would harden. She tried to talk to me using slow lip movements, exaggerated gestures, but it was exhausting for both of us. Eventually, she resorted to her phone. "You look drained," she typed. "Are they actually letting you rest?" I shrugged because I didn't know how to explain the heaviness in my chest. The helplessness, the nagging thought that something wasn't right, not medically, but socially, emotionally, structurally. My marriage had shifted into an arrangement where I had no access, no voice, no privacy. But I kept telling myself it was temporary, that Ethan was protecting me, not isolating me. One afternoon, Jenna hesitated before leaving. She typed, "I saw Ethan at the hospital last week." She paused, typing slowly. He wasn't alone. The sentence sat between us, like a stone. I shook my head hard, more out of fear than certainty. Jenna didn't push. She just squeezed my hand before walking out. The front door closed without a sound I could hear, but I felt the vibration through the floorboards. 1 week later, Dr. Carter told me my hearing might never return fully. He wrote it gently on a small whiteboard. Some patients improve, some don't. Ethan stood behind him, nodding with exaggerated sympathy, his hand on my shoulder. But his grip felt too firm, like reassurance wrapped around possession. Then came the day everything changed. I sat in Dr. Carter's office for another routine test, expecting the familiar dead air. But when he pressed the button there, it was a faint beep, distant but unmistakable. My breath caught. Another beep, then another. Sounds rushed into my ears like light flooding a dark room. I whispered, "I can hear," and my own voice startled me. It was small, rusty foreign. Dr. Carter smiled wide, thrilled. He explained the recovery process slowly, carefully making sure I wasn't overwhelmed. I barely heard him. I was too busy hearing everything else, the squeak of his chair wheels paper, rustling, the faint buzz of the old fluorescent lamp. Before I left, he advised me gently, "Take a day, reacclimate. Don't overwhelm yourself with conversations yet. Let your mind adjust. A day. One day to process the miracle." But fate had other plans. When I walked into the house, Ethan was waiting. He held out the notepad like always. "How did it go?" He wrote, eyes wide with fabricated hope. And for reasons I couldn't explain then, something inside me whispered, "Wait." So I wrote, "No change." He exhaled, hugged me, and didn't notice how stiff I went. Maybe because he didn't care, or maybe because he already had a plan that depended on my silence. That night I lay in bed and listened, really listened, to the hum of the heater, to the soft tapping of branches against the window, and then to Ethan's voice through the barely cracked bathroom door whispering into his phone. Words I was never meant to hear. "Her being deaf is our golden window. We have to move now, Mom. Courts won't question a husband caring for an incompetent spouse." I froze. The world that had just returned to me crashed again, but this time it wasn't silence. It was clarity. The morning after hearing Ethan's whispered confession should have been the morning I ran, or screamed, or confronted him. But instead I played deaf. I slipped back into silence like it was a mask I could pull over my entire body. Every movement, every glance, every breath became part of a performance I never auditioned for. And yet, it might have been the most important role of my life. I woke up before Ethan that day, lying still and listening to the soft, rhythmic sound of his breathing beside me. It wasn't comforting, not anymore. It sounded like a countdown. Each inhale, each exhale ticked toward whatever plan he and Vivian were rushing to meet. I studied his face, the one I had once memorized with affection. Now it looked unfamiliar, too smooth, too practiced. The face of a man who believed he was smarter than everyone around him, especially me. When he finally stirred, he blinked up at the ceiling for a long moment before turning to look at me. His expression softened, exactly on cue. If I hadn't heard the truth the night before, I might have believed it. He picked up the notepad on his nightstand and wrote, "Rough night. Any headaches, I can make breakfast." I stared at the words until they blurred, pretending I didn't notice the slight tremble in his hand. Not from worry, but from anticipation. I nodded weakly, keeping my eyes down. The role required underreaction. He walked out of the room, and the moment the door clicked behind him, I sat up and pressed a hand to my throat. I could hear everything again. Every clatter of dishes downstairs. Every creak in the hallway. Every muffled vibration of his voice as he made a phone call he thought I couldn't possibly overhear. "She didn't improve," he whispered. "Perfect. We're still on schedule. Perfect." The words scraped through me like a serrated knife. I forced myself to breathe evenly, quietly. If he came back and saw me shaking, it would ruin everything. So I steadied myself and walked to the bathroom, counted to 10, and looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back with hollow eyes and a jaw clenched too tight. I looked like a ghost in my own life. I didn't know it then, my future self would tell me, but this was the moment I officially stepped into war. When I walked into the kitchen later, Ethan acted like everything was normal. He plated scrambled eggs, arranged toast, even brewed coffee, letting the rich smell drift through the air like a peace offering. Vivian was already seated at the counter, her posture immaculate, her expression soft in a patronizing kind of way. She wrote on her own notepad a new habit of hers. You must feel so isolated. We're here for you. I fought the urge to snatch the pen and write back something sharp. Instead, I lowered my head and gave a small smile. Vivian reached out as if to touch my arm but stopped short, her hand hovering. Poor dear, she murmured, knowing I wouldn't hear. I heard every syllable. After breakfast, Ethan insisted on driving me to my checkup with Dr. Carter. I don't want you walking alone, he wrote. I need to keep you safe. Safe. If I hadn't already known the truth, that word might have felt comforting, but now it felt like a cage. At the clinic, Dr. Carter greeted us warmly. He spoke slowly, clearly, but Ethan interrupted before he could get far. We'll keep communication written for her, he said too quickly. It's less stressful. I saw the flicker of confusion on Dr. Carter's face. He wrote on his tablet, if Clara prefers writing, that's fine, but we should still test vocal response eventually. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he smiled. Of course, eventually. He didn't want my voice anywhere near the record. I didn't know the reason yet, but I filed the moment away. Another red thread in the web he was spinning around me. On the drive home, Ethan hummed quietly, a habit he'd always had when thinking deeply. I used to find it endearing. Now it made my skin crawl. His fingers drummed lightly against the steering wheel as he navigated the suburbs. When we passed the Lakeside Ridge billboard, luxury living coming soon, his eyes lingered a fraction too long. I followed his gaze. The future he wanted wasn't a life with me. It was a life funded by me. When we got home, he disappeared into his office. Normally, he'd leave the door cracked open, an unspoken invitation, but today, he shut it firmly. The thud of the latch echoed down the hallway. I stood there for a long moment, pulse ticking in my throat. Should I check again? Should I wait? Should I pretend none of this existed? My hand drifted toward the doorknob before I realized what I was doing. I forced myself to turn away. Not yet. If he caught me now, everything would unravel. I needed patience. I needed timing. I needed certainty. What I didn't know is that he was already altering documents inside that office, reshaping my life on paper before I could reclaim it in reality. Jenna arrived unexpectedly that afternoon. I didn't hear the knock, but I felt the vibration of it through the floor. She stepped in with bags of groceries and a look in her eyes that suggested she wasn't just here to check on me. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment I almost broke, but I kept my breathing steady, maintaining the role. She pulled back, studying my face, then took out her phone. You look different, she typed. Is something wrong? Everything I wanted to write, everything is wrong. But I simply shook my head. She frowned, then typed, I got called into the hospital for a double shift last week. I saw Ethan there again. He wasn't with a woman this time, but he was talking to someone in admin. Looked official. My heart stuttered. What kind of official? I typed, keeping my expression neutral. She shrugged. Paperwork. He said something about needing medical confirmation. He didn't see me. Medical confirmation. My stomach clenched. Ethan wasn't just exploiting my deafness. He was crafting a legal narrative around it. One that made him the benevolent caretaker, and me the dependent burden. I nodded cautiously, pretending comprehension mixed with sorrow, not rage. Jenna squeezed my hand again, her eyes softening. She typed, I know you're scared. I know you feel trapped. Just let me help you. I wanted to scream, I can hear you, Jenna, but I couldn't take that risk. Not yet. My secret was my only shield. As she left, I caught Ethan watching from the top of the stairs. His expression was unreadable, but something tightened in his eyes when he saw Jenna kiss my cheek goodbye. A possessiveness flared dark, almost territorial. He didn't like Jenna's involvement, which meant she was a threat. Which meant I needed her even more. That night, after the house settled and Vivian returned to her guest room, I listened again, truly listened to Ethan's voice drifting down the hallway as he spoke to someone over the phone. The words were quieter this time, more deliberate. The psychological report should be ready by the end of the week. Yes, it states impaired judgment and dependency. She won't challenge it. She can't. No, she still can't hear a thing. Impaired judgment, dependency. He wasn't describing me. He was creating me. A woman who couldn't sign a check. A woman who couldn't decide for herself. A woman who couldn't legally object when her husband drained her bank account. My throat tightened. I pressed a hand against my chest to keep myself from gasping. Every word was cutting my life into smaller pieces. The next day brought another shift. When Ethan left for work, he made a show of leaving his office unlocked, a fake gesture of trust. The moment his car rolled out of the driveway, I rushed inside. The air smelled like printer ink and stale coffee. His laptop was locked, but the filing cabinet wasn't. I pulled the bottom drawer and found exactly what I feared: the folder. Inside were drafts of legal documents with my name typed neatly at the top. Medical incapacity, temporary guardianship, durable power of attorney, psychological assessment, bank statements with transfers in bold print money moving from my inheritance account into a secondary account under Ethan's name, all dated within the last 3 weeks. My hands trembled violently. I held my breath, taking picture after picture with my phone. Each click was a heartbeat. Each heartbeat was a countdown. Just as I slid the folder back into place, I heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. He was home early. I froze, blood turning cold. The doorknob turned downstairs. I shut the drawer, flicked off the desk lamp, stepped out of the office, and closed the door with a silence only someone who had once lived without sound could master. I grabbed a magazine from the coffee table, flopped onto the couch, and pretended I was reading. Ethan walked in moments later. He studied me for a beat too long. Then he smiled. "How's my girl?" he wrote. I forced a small smile back. Inside, I was unraveling. But the roll wasn't over yet. Not even close. The next morning, I woke with a kind of clarity that felt dangerous, like the silence I'd lived in for weeks had sharpened my instincts instead of dulling them. Ethan moved around the room, humming again, flipping through his closet like it was any other day. I watched him in the mirror as I tied my hair back, careful not to react when he pulled out the notepad. "Mom wants to come by later," he wrote. "She thinks you need company." He had no idea how much company I'd had inside my own head: fear, suspicion, strategy, all crowding close. I nodded with my practiced softness. His eyes warmed like he'd scored a victory. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. This time, I didn't just feel the vibration, I heard the faint chime, another reminder that the world had returned to me whether Ethan liked it or not. He opened the door to let Vivian in. She swept inside, wearing a soft pink coat, carrying a stack of grocery bags that looked staged for a photograph. "My sweet Clara," she cooed, knowing I couldn't hear her. "You look pale again." I kept my gaze low. She placed a hand on my arm, squeezing lightly. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. Her fingers were too cold. While they made tea in the kitchen, I moved through the living room, quietly gathering my courage. The walls seemed to lean in, listening, waiting. If houses could hold breath, ours did constantly. Later, Vivian took out a notebook of her own. She wrote, "It's important that you rest. Ethan is doing everything he can. You're lucky to have him." Lucky. The word stung. I scribbled a simple thank you. She smiled in that tight, triumphant way of her, and the smile of someone who believed she'd won something. That afternoon, the mail truck pulled up. I watched from the window as the carrier placed letters into our box. I waited, counted slowly, then stepped toward the door. But Ethan was already there. He moved too fast for it to be casual. He collected everything, rifled through the envelopes with his thumb, then tucked 2 of them into his jacket pocket before walking to his office. A cold realization hit me. He wasn't just hiding things. He was intercepting communication meant for me. Bank notices, medical letters, legal warnings, anything that might disrupt his story. I stepped back before he turned. My pulse drummed loudly in my ears, a sound I never thought I'd hear again. It filled my head with a single pounding message move. That evening, Jenna texted me again. I sat alone in the kitchen, pretending to scroll aimlessly. When Ethan wasn't looking, I opened her message. "Something's wrong. I can feel it. Please tell me if you need me." I typed back a simple heart emoji, safe, vague, and tucked the phone away. I hated hiding from her, but I couldn't risk anything slipping too soon. That night, Ethan invited Vivian to stay for dinner. They cooked together, laughing, clinking spoons, stealing glances at me like I was an object rather than a person. I watched them move around our kitchen with an ease that felt predatory. Eventually, Vivian leaned close to Ethan and whispered something. He nodded, his jaw setting. Then he picked up the notepad. "Tomorrow," he wrote, "we need to go over some paperwork together. Simple stuff. Household finances." My stomach dropped. I smiled gently, then nodded. But inside, something cracked and hardened. The next morning, the house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan went upstairs, claiming he needed to review some documents before our talk. I seized the moment. Moving quickly, I went into the dining room where he'd laid out a neat stack of papers. Legal documents, more thorough than the drafts I'd photographed. I scanned them fast, durable power of attorney, medical consent authorization, petition for temporary guardianship, a notary appointment time, all dated for the next week, all signed with my forged signature. My hands trembled so violently I almost tore the pages. I photographed everything in bursts, listening for footsteps. Every second felt like a razor suspended above me. Then I saw something that made my vision blur. A printed psychological evaluation I had never seen before. At the bottom, it claimed I exhibited impaired decision-making and reduced cognitive reliability due to prolonged sensory loss and emotional instability. Emotional instability. He hadn't just stolen my silence, he'd rewritten my sanity. A sound escaped me, sharp, broken. I covered my mouth, instantly horrified. Had he heard? Was he coming? Footsteps approached. I shoved the papers back together, slid them into their exact position, and moved to the kitchen just as Ethan entered the hallway. He watched me, his stare lingering a beat too long. Then he lifted the notepad. "Ready to talk soon," he wrote. I nodded, swallowing everything that wanted to burst free. After lunch, Jenna showed up again. She said she brought soup, but the truth was etched all over her face. She didn't trust Ethan. She didn't trust Vivian. She didn't trust the way I'd shrunk inside myself. She stepped close, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I could see her silently mouthing, "Are you okay?" And I broke. Something inside me decided, enough pretending, enough protecting Ethan's illusion, enough playing the role of the helpless wife waiting for rescue. When she sat beside me and started writing on her phone, I leaned in close enough that Ethan and Vivian wouldn't see my lips move, and I whispered, barely audible, "I can hear." Her head snapped up, but she didn't gasp, didn't widen her eyes. She controlled her reaction like a seasoned nurse masking shock with professional calm. Instead, she typed on the notepad, "You look warm. Let me check your temperature." She stood performing the gesture, then tilted her phone to me with a message typed in small, discreet letters, "Tell me everything." I typed back quickly, hands trembling. "He's stealing my inheritance, filing for guardianship, appointment with lawyer soon, forged signatures. I have photos." Her face darkened with something far deeper than anger resolve. Ethan stepped into the living room, then smiling like everything was sunshine. "Jenna," he said aloud, forgetting I could hear, "Good to see you." She turned to him, her voice smooth as glass. "I was just checking on her. She needs rest." Vivian appeared, too, smiling her plastic smile. "You're always so thoughtful." Jenna held her gaze for a beat, then forced a polite expression. "Always." After she left, I watched from the window as she got into her car. But she didn't drive away. She parked down the street, engine idling, waiting for what I didn't know then. But later I would realize, she knew this day would fracture open. Inside the house, Ethan and Vivian spoke in hushed tones in the hallway. I heard every word. "You should keep Jenna away," Vivian whispered sharply. "She interferes." "She won't be a problem," Ethan murmured. "Once the papers are filed, no one can interfere." Interfere. That's what he called it, interference. As though my autonomy was an obstacle he had to bypass. That night I barely slept. The universe had handed me sound again. And with sound came truth. And with truth came danger. The next morning, everything accelerated. Ethan dressed in a crisp, button-down shirt, his important meeting uniform. He checked his watch repeatedly. Vivian hovered near the doorway, adjusting her coat, telling him to hurry. "You have a narrow window," she whispered. "Once the court sees her condition, they'll approve it." Condition? I almost laughed. The only condition I had was a husband who believed disability was an asset. When they left, I waited at the top of the stairs until I heard the car fade down the street. I counted to 60, then 60 again. Only when the world was quiet did I grab my phone and call Jenna. Hearing my voice again made her gasp. "Oh, my God, Clara." I cut her off. "I need your help." Within minutes, she arrived at my door. This time, she didn't bring food. She brought a plan. She also brought Melissa, her lawyer friend, on speaker. Melissa listened to my trembling account, then said with ice-edged precision, "You need to get to Ethan's lawyer before he does. If those papers get filed, reversing them becomes a nightmare." I felt sick, but determined. Jenna drove, fast, focused, while I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, hands shaking, mind racing. The world outside was loud cars, wind birds, but inside me, everything was tight, coiled, ready to snap. When we reached Ethan's office, I braced myself to run inside and confront the man who planned to legally erase me. Because escalation wasn't escalation anymore. It was survival. When Jenna pulled into the parking lot of Palmer and Associates, my pulse was hammering so violently it felt like a separate creature inside my chest. The building stood tall and glossy, one of those modern structures with too much glass clean lines. Sharp angles, a place built for people who won battles on paper, not in person. The sun reflected off its windows in hard, cold flashes. It looked like a fortress, the kind meant to intimidate anyone walking toward it. "Are you ready?" Jenna asked, her voice tight but steady. I wasn't. But readiness wasn't a luxury anymore. It was a necessity. "I have to be," I whispered, because the alternative was losing everything. My money, my autonomy, my sanity, signed away by a man I had once trusted more than anyone else alive. I pushed open the car door. The air was brisk, sharp enough to sting my lungs. My legs trembled as I walked toward the entrance, but each step felt like reclaiming something Ethan had assumed he'd taken from me. A piece of myself, a piece of my voice. Inside the lobby was a wash of polished marble and soft echoes. A receptionist sat behind a curved desk typing quietly. The scent of lemony cleaning spray hung in the air. Two men in suits murmured near the elevators, briefcases in hand. The world here moved in contracts and signatures and carefully modulated voices. When the receptionist looked up, she gave me a professional smile. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" I didn't hesitate. "My name is Clara Bennett. I'm here to see Mr. Palmer immediately." Her fingers paused on the keyboard. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, my voice clear, steady, "but my husband does, and what he's trying to do is fraudulent." Something flickered in her eyes, a hint of alarm. She lifted the phone, delicately pressed a button, murmured something I couldn't catch. But while she was still speaking, the glass doors behind me swung open. I didn't have to turn to know it was Ethan, but I did anyway. He stood frozen in the doorway, one foot still outside his mother, just behind him. His face, God. It shifted so quickly it was almost painful to watch. First confusion, then shock, then something almost primal. Fear. "Clara," he choked out. You can hear his voice cracked in the middle like a thin piece of glass under pressure. Vivian's hand gripped his arm, knuckles whitening. I turned fully to face him. For the first time in weeks, I didn't lower my eyes or pretend I didn't understand. "Yes, Ethan," I said, each word clean sharp. "I can hear." The silence that followed was louder than any sound in the room. He blinked rapidly like he couldn't compute it. Why didn't you tell you I finished?" "Maybe because I wanted to hear the truth first." Color drained from his face. I watched real-time recognition ripple through him, every whispered phone call, every forged document, every step of the plan that depended on my silence. He stepped forward too quickly, his voice hushed, strained. "Clara, let's go somewhere private. Please. This isn't what you think." I lifted my phone. "I have every document you forged, every email you printed, every bank transfer you made, every legal form you signed with my name." His jaw slackened. Vivian made a small strangled sound like her throat had closed. "Mrs. Bennett," a voice said behind me. I turned to see a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit standing in the doorway of a hallway. He looked like someone who lived entirely inside boardrooms, impeccable posture, silver hair, understated power. "Mr. Palmer?" I asked. "Yes." His eyes moved from me to Ethan, then back. "Why don't we all step into the conference room? I believe there is confusion to resolve." Confusion. The word felt almost laughable, but I nodded. Because the battlefield had been chosen, and it wasn't my home, or Ethan's office, or the sterile clinic where I'd rediscovered sound. It was here, in a glass-walled room where truth would echo whether Ethan wanted it to or not. The conference room was bright, almost aggressively so. A long glass table stretched across the center. Leather chairs circled it. Jenna slipped in behind me, her presence steady, grounding. Vivian hovered by the wall, wringing her hands. Mr. Palmer gestured for everyone to sit, then closed the door. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clenched. He tried to school his expression into calm, but panic leaked through the cracks. "Clara?" He started softly. "Honey, I was going to explain everything. You weren't supposed to find out like this." I laughed a cold, unfamiliar sound even to myself. Find out what? That you were trying to become my legal guardian, that you forged my signature, that you filed paperwork stating I was mentally unfit, that you moved $85,000 into an account I didn't even know existed. His face contorted. I was going to return it. I cut him off. Return my parents' money. The last thing they ever gave me, tears welled in his eyes. Probably real. But real tears don't erase real intent. Clara, you don't understand, he whispered. I needed that investment. I needed to secure our future. Our future. My voice rose, slicing through the brightness of the room. Or your reputation. Your ego. Your obsession with keeping up with Garrett Rhodes and his shiny new development. He looked like I'd slapped him. I leaned in, lowering my voice to something colder. You didn't want a marriage. You wanted leverage. Vivian stepped forward, suddenly voice shaking. He was doing it for both of you. You're being dramatic. Jenna snapped. Sit down. It startled even me. Vivian froze, then lowered herself into a chair. Mr. Palmer cleared his throat. Mrs. Bennett, you mentioned forged signatures. May I ask? You can ask, I said, pulling out my phone. And you can see. I laid it on the table, screen bright gallery open. Dozens of photographs. Legal agreements with my name scrawled in handwriting that wasn't mine. Psychological evaluations I'd never seen. Bank transfers written in thick black ink. Mr. Palmer's face shifted, not shock, but something more dangerous for Ethan, professional alarm. Mr. Hayes, he said slowly, did you tell me your wife was unable to communicate verbally or comprehend complex information? Ethan swallowed. She was deaf. I was handling. He told you I was incompetent. I said, not looking away from Palmer. He used my medical condition to justify power of attorney. That's not. Ethan tried. I slammed my palm onto the table. Everyone jumped, even myself. Don't lie. The room crackled with tension. I heard you, I said. Every word. Every call you thought was private. You said her being deaf is our golden window. You said the courts wouldn't question guardianship. You said I wouldn't fight because I couldn't. His lip trembled. Clara, please. Don't say my name, I snapped. You don't get to say my name. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. Then Mr. Palmer exhaled slowly. Mr. Hayes, he said, I cannot participate in this. Effective immediately, I'm withdrawing from representation. If any paperwork has been prepared, it will not be filed. A shaky breath escaped me. Ethan shot up from his chair. You're my lawyer, I am, Palmer said firmly. A lawyer bound by ethics. And I will not be implicated in fraud. Ethan looked around wildly, like the room was collapsing in on him. Mom, he whispered desperately, do something. Vivian stood slowly. She approached me with trembling hands. Clara, you're overreacting. All marriages go through. I stepped back. This isn't a marriage. This is criminal. She flinched as though I'd struck her. Ethan's voice rose, frantic, cracking. Clara, please, I love you. You know I love you. No, I said quietly. You love access. He shook his head violently. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You weren't supposed to hear. You weren't supposed to find the document. The admission hung in the air, too honest, too raw. Even Vivian gasped at that. Ethan's voice softened, pleading. If you file charges, if you press this, you'll ruin my life. I looked at him for a long time, at the man I loved, the man I trusted, the man who saw my suffering as an opportunity. You ruined it yourself, I whispered. Then I turned to Mr. Palmer. Can you recommend divorce attorneys? Ethan staggered backward as though the words physically struck him. Clara, wait. Don't do this. We can fix it. I straightened, feeling something inside me settle, a steel rod replacing the hollow ache. I'm not waiting, I said. Not anymore. I walked toward the door. Behind me, Ethan finally broke. Clara, he shouted, voice echoing down the hall. Don't walk away from me. I stopped just long enough to look over my shoulder. You walked away first, I said. The moment you realized my silence benefited you. And then I stepped out of the room. The glass door closed behind me with a soft, decisive click, a sound I would remember for a very long time. The cold air outside Palmer and Associates hit me like a slap, sharp, clean electric. For a moment, I just stood there on the concrete steps, breathing in the world that had once been silent to me. Car engines rumbled in the distance. A gust of wind cut across the parking lot, rustling the budding trees. Doors slammed, keys jingled, traffic hummed. All of it felt like a reminder. You're back. You're not powerless. Not anymore. Jenna hurried down the steps behind me. Clara, she said, breathless. Are you okay? I almost laughed, the kind of laugh that breaks at the edges. I think okay is too small a word for whatever this is. She nodded, slipping her arm through mine as if anchoring me. Ethan's face back there. She shook her head. I've never seen a man realize he's lost everything in real time. Lost everything. The words lingered, heavy, true. But this wasn't victory. Not yet. Not even close. Jenna unlocked her car, but I didn't get in immediately. I looked back at the building. Through the glass entrance, I could still see movement shadows of Ethan and Vivian gesturing frantically inside the conference room. They looked like two people drowning in blame and panic, clinging to each other only because there was no one else left to hold on to. Do you think he'll follow us? Jenna asked. He might, I said. But not today. He's too busy trying to convince himself it's not over. We got into the car. As Jenna pulled out of the lot, I felt a vibration against my thigh. My phone. A text from an unknown number. This is Melissa. I heard everything through Jenna. Call me when you're ready to file. You have more evidence than most victims ever do. Victims. The word landed in my gut. But instead of shrinking, something cold and sharp straightened inside me. I typed back, thank you. I'm not done. Jenna noticed my expression as she drove. What are you thinking? I stared out the window. The sky was a muted gray and the world blurred past in quick streaks, street signs, storefronts, passers-by, who had no idea a woman in the next lane over had nearly lost her entire life to a man she loved. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that Ethan believes the only weapon I had was my hearing, that once it came back the game was over. And he's wrong, Jenna asked. I turned toward her, my voice steady. Oh, he's very wrong, because the truth was recovering my hearing wasn't my revenge. It was just the beginning of it. We drove straight to my house, not ours. That distinction mattered now. The place felt different as soon as I stepped inside. Every corner held a memory of my silence. The kitchen counter where Ethan and Vivian whispered over tea. The hallway where I first sensed the truth. The bedroom where he pretended to comfort me while secretly planning to erase me. Jenna closed the door behind us. We need to get whatever documents he hasn't hidden yet. That's the plan, I said. We moved quickly. In the office, I opened the filing cabinet again. This time, I wasn't afraid of footsteps in the driveway. This time, I wasn't hurting in silence. Inside the bottom drawer, the folder sat exactly where I'd left it earlier. But something was different. A new sheet was tucked behind the others, a printed email thread. Ethan to Garrett Rhodes. Garrett funds will be in place by next week. My wife's condition is severe. Doctor says decision-making is impaired. I'll have full control soon. The lakeside deal is perfect timing. Don't let the spot go. E. Beneath it, a second email understood. But hurry. The other investors are pushing. If you can't secure the capital, I'll offer your spot to Holland. My blood ran cold, but not out of fear, out of fury. Jenna read over my shoulder. He was gambling with your life like it was chips in a poker game. I folded the paper carefully. This needs to go in the file. We photographed everything again, this time uploading copies to cloud storage. My email, Melissa's email, Jenna's phone, and a physical thumb drive. Redundancy was safety. Redundancy was freedom. When we finished, Jenna exhaled. Okay, what now? I looked around the office. The walls were lined with certificates showcasing Ethan's accomplishments, real estate achievements, awards, framed photos of him shaking hands with people he admired, all of it built on an image, a reputation. And now that reputation was the most fragile part of him. He fears exposure, I said. He fears consequences. He fears not being the man people think he is. So we expose him. A slow, controlled resolve spread through me. Melissa said financial exploitation of a disabled spouse is a felony in this state. Jenna's eyebrows rose. You want him arrested. I want him accountable, I corrected. Legally, publicly, permanently. The doorbell rang. Both of us froze. Through the frosted window panel, I saw a familiar silhouette. Ethan. He wasn't alone. Vivian stood beside him, clutching her purse like a shield. He knocked once. Hard. Clara, he called through the door, voice tight. We need to talk. Please. His voice cracked again, this time not in confusion, but desperation. I stepped toward the door but didn't open it. I stood close enough that my voice carried through the wood. We're done talking, Ethan. Silence. Then a trembling inhale. You're my wife, he said. We can fix this. No, I answered. You don't fix betrayal, you document it. He banged on the door once more. Clara, don't do this. Juan almost smiled. Cold, quiet, controlled. I'm already doing it, I said. And this time you can't overpower me. Not with silence, not with signatures, not with lies. Vivian's voice broke in trembling. Clara, please, you'll ruin him. He ruined himself, I said. I'm just making sure the right people see it. I turned away, walked back into his office, and picked up the folder. The sound of Ethan pounding on the door grew louder, echoing through the house. But it didn't shake me. Not anymore. Because for the first time since this began, the noise belonged to him. And the power belonged to me. If you've ever felt unheard, unseen, or treated like you didn't matter in your own home, then you understand why this story can't end here. I'm not the same woman who lived in silence, and I won't be the woman who lets betrayal slide back into the shadows. So if you want to know what happens next, what he tries, what I uncover, and how far a desperate man will go when his world starts collapsing, make sure you subscribe. This story isn't over, not even close.